I'll follow you to Sunday school.
That's your packet for today.
That's a lot.
Thank you.
There?
That's
I
right.
don't know if it's accessible to the
Harry Brothers. Harry.
where you want to sit. There?
Genesis chapter 23.
I always want to say something.
Genesis chapter 23. Mike has done an awesome job leading us through the first section of Genesis. He was doing such a great job, he decided to go over to Bible Bowl side of things. So I'm glad I talked to him last week because we had just been standing here twiddling our thumbs today. So I thought, hey, why not finish the book? So that's what we're going to do. So between now and the 1st of March, we're going to finish the book of Genesis. The last few weeks, we have witnessed Abraham through the peaks and the valleys of a life well lived. We have seen him leave his homeland to walk with God by faith. We have witnessed his successes and his failures. We've seen him experience the joy of childhood and watched him as he willingly gave that child up for the will of God. Abraham's life has been filled with the best and the worst of what life can dish out. Last week, as we saw in Genesis chapter 22, it took him to the pinnacle of faith and obedience in offering his son. And today in Genesis 23, he's going to say goodbye to his wife. Now, it may interest you to know that the Bible does not record many deathbed scenes. In the Old Testament, it usually tells us, so-and-so lived and died so many years. Right? So-and-so lived X years and died. We don't usually know how they died, where they died, when they died. And in the New Testament, we have even less information about death. That's because the gospel message is about life, eternal life. So, when a whole chapter envelops a death scene, man, it must be important. And it teaches us the biblical view of death and the promises of God. Now, death's not a subject that we like to talk about a lot. Some even probably will get up and walk out. All right. But what are some facts we know about death? What are some facts you know about death?
It happens to everyone.
All right, it happens to everybody. Hebrews says it's appointed once for man or people to die. Unless Jesus comes again, we're going to die. What are some other facts about death?
Those who are left behind grieve.
Okay, those who are left behind grieve. They mourn.
Well, you'll never get out of this world alive.
Okay, never get out of this world alive. Any other facts about death?
Change our mailing address.
All right, we change our mailing address.
Physical death is irreversible.
All right, it's irreversible. Okay? As a Christian, it's not really about this life. It's about the life to come for us. Right? We're just passing through. We're just in here for a mist, James says, and then our life vanishes away. Okay? So some good facts. Well, let's start with why Abraham purchased a field. Why did he purchase a field? All right? Dale, if you read verses 1 and 2 of Genesis chapter 23 for us there.
Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died at Arabah, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and to weep over her.
All right, thank you. Now, what two significant things are we told here? There's two significant things in these two verses. What's the first thing?
Hurry.
All right, her age. Sarah lived 127 years, then she died. which means she lived 37 years after Isaac was born. All right? Which also means she's the only woman whose age of death is mentioned in the Bible. Thought that was a pretty interesting fact. All right? What's the second significant thing there?
Abraham mourned.
Huh?
Abraham mourned.
He mourned, or he wept, he cried. All right? He was sad that his wife had died. All right? Now, what does it suggest that he mourned for Sarah? What does that suggest?
Here deeply.
All right, he cared deeply for his wife,
He gave her honor.
gives her honor.
Well, I'm thinking about, and we see this amongst people in our own congregation, when you've been married to someone for a long time, and we've had, Larry Balch passed away recently, and I think they were married 60 years.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and you that's the life you know,
Yeah.
right? You don't know a life without that person at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Abraham felt the same way.
Yeah.
That this is the person, and how long had they been together?
Yeah.
Because they lived pretty long. So 100 years. So it was, for him. It was what I have no idea what
Yeah.
life will be like without Sarah.
Yeah. In my friend's bulletin yesterday, I noticed they're honoring a couple at his church that will, at the middle of this month, be married 75 years. And at the end of the month, on the 30th, he turns 99. I thought, wow, what a great... And then I read in the Christian Chronicle, there is a church in Texas, 4 couples this year celebrated 65 years of marriage within that congregation. 4 couples. That says something. And so, yeah, they've been through a lot. And so he is mourning here. Well, what takes place next might be called a little slice of ancient life. Brian, if you'll read verses 3 through 9 for us there, in Genesis 23.
And Abraham rose up from before his dead and said to the Hittites, I am a sojourner and foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. The Hittites answered Abraham, Hear us, my lord, you are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you his tomb to hinder you from burying your dead. Abraham rose and bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land. And he said to them, If you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me Ephron the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as property for a burying place.
All right, thank you. So don't miss the fact that after being in Canaan for 42 years, Abraham still doesn't own what?
Land.
Land. All right? He doesn't own any part of the promised land. And in fact, it's not even the promised land yet. It's just Canaan. Okay? It won't become the promised land until Joshua. Okay? When they take it. All right? So what does Abraham consider himself to be there in those verses? What does he consider himself to be? A foreigner, some versions say. A what? A sojourner in another version. Anybody else got a?
He's a rambling man.
A rambling man.
He's a wanderer. Yeah.
A wanderer. Some versions say an alien, a stranger, a foreigner, a sojourner. All right? He's just wandering there. All right? Now, why do you think he considers himself to be that? Why does he think that way? Why does he think himself to be an alien, a stranger, a wanderer, a sojourner?
Living in a tent.
All right, been living in tent. No permanent address. Why else do you think he thinks this way? I'm just an alien. I'm just a stranger. his homeland. All he owns is clothing on his back and maybe some animals. Doesn't even own any property. Okay? And so after 42 years of living through different circumstances and leaving prosperity in the Ur of Chaldees for an unknown future, he has nothing to call his own.
But just like Christians are unique, he's unique here.
Yeah.
We live in the world, but we're not of the world.
Yeah.
He lives here, but he's not of here.
That's right. And I'm so glad Moses doesn't take up section to say, and Abraham owned this, and he owned this, and he had this, and this, and this, and this, and this. You know, because it wasn't about the stuff, obviously. It was about being faithful to God. Were you going to say something, Brian? No? Okay. All right. So what action does Abraham take? What action does he take? Verses 3 through 9 there. What does he take? He's been mourning, so what action does he take next? Does it say?
He's placed buried in the way.
Not yet. You missed the first action. He got up. He stood up. All right, he'd been mourning, and he arose, or he stood up. And then, now Paul, he wants what?
He wants to buy a place to bury his family.
Yeah, he wants to purchase a burial site. Somewhere to bury his wife. All right, there. Now, he doesn't even own a burial plot. All right. Hebrews 11, verse 9 reminds us, by faith he made his home, that Abraham, in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs of him of the same promise. Okay. What did the Hittites offer Abraham? What did they offer to him? There. What did they offer, Mike?
Just use one of our tombs.
All right, just use one of our tombs. All right? Really what they're saying is, I believe, is why not one of the choicest tombs or caves? All right? As a gift, since they considered him a prince.
But they're not giving up any property in that offer,
Yeah. Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mike?
There's a lot of advantages to them because of him being so powerful and rich. It would be almost like you would do within some type of peace negotiation.
Yeah.
Right? If there was ever a problem in the future, is but don't you remember your own wife is buried in my tomb or one of our tombs?
Yeah.
So it's all advantage to them.
Yeah. Or let's say this classroom over here by Katie is the cave. And here's Abraham, otherwise today known as Dale, and he's going to have to bury his wife, not to get morbid, but there's the cave, and here's the land that Mike owns, this Hittite. Now, how's Dale going to get there? Well, he's going to need permission because they're not offering this, are they yet? They're offering that, the cave. Why not have one of our caves? Okay? Now, why does he refuse? Why does he refuse their offer?
I don't want to do it legitimately. He wants to go through the process of purchasing.
Okay.
He wouldn't be under obligation that way to show any favoritism or something.
Okay. Carol?
Didn't King David do the same thing? If it doesn't cost me anything, when he was buying the threshing floor in the barn. So I think in this case it's the same. If it doesn't cost me anything, then it's not.
Okay.
He wanted the right to it. No other person. Everything else he was offered, there was already probably dozens of bones in there, right? He wanted something for his family's generation.
And I believe even though he's a foreigner, alien, stranger, he considers himself, he understands Middle Eastern law agreements, I'll call it. that in order to get from here, from his tent to the cave, again, he's going to need to own that property. And so when they say, hey, here's our cave, take our choicest cave, he knew it might come with some strings attached. Okay? For how do I get there? Except I sneak onto somebody's property illegally because it's not mine. Okay? And so he knows that, hey, maybe it's not looking as good as, hey, here's this, take it, use it. Okay? But he wants a plot of land to bury his wife Sarah in peace and in dignity. Well, the next few verses make it sound like, let's make a deal! I see you all came dressed up, ready to play the game today.
So here, we have the whole, up to this point, we have him respecting rituals.
Yeah.
I mean, rituals of mourning,
Mm-hmm.
rituals of respect, of entreaty, and rituals of bargaining. Because, you know, and that's important because we need to know that he is honoring everyone. And that's how, you know, being the father of all the generations on, he's laying the foundation of honor. Where in the past, he didn't always do that.
No.
He's changed.
Yep, good point. Anybody else before we move on? All right, let's read. Ephraim the Hittite in verse 10 was sitting among his people, and he replied to Abraham in the hearing of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of his city. No, my lord, he said, listen to me, I give you the field, and I will give you the cave that is in it. I will give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead. Again, Abraham bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to Ephraim in their hearing, listen to me, if you will. I will pay the price of the field. Accept it from me so I can bury my dead there. Ephraim answered Abraham, listen to me, my lord. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. But what is it between me and you? Bury your dead. Abraham agreed to Ephraim's terms and weighed out for him the price that he named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weight current among the merchants. So Ephraim's field in Machalath near Mamre, both the field and the cave in it, and all the trees and the borders of the field was indeeded. So Abraham, as his property in the presence of all the Hittites, would come to the gate of the city. And afterwards Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave in the field of Machalath near Mamre, which is Hebron in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave in it were deeded to Abraham by the Hittites as a burial site. All right. What are Abraham and Ephraim doing here? What's going on? All right, they're making a deal. What else would we call it?
Coming to an agreement.
Coming to agreement. What else would we call it? Negotiating. What else would we call it? Come on, I know some of you go to flea markets and swap meats. What do? Some of you get out the cruises. Bill Whistler, what do? Bargain. You haggle over the price, don't you? You negotiate. Well, that's a little bit too much, and then you don't want to show your hand, and I really would like it, and they start to come down, and maybe you walk away a little bit. Oh, no, come back. I really meant this price. And it's a whole lot less than what they just mentioned. And so you barter or haggle over the price, and that's what they're doing here. Ephraim offers him a field, but why won't Abraham accept it for free?
As I say, it's the same thing we were talking about before. It's interesting, what they're bartering over is not really the price, because price is only mentioned once, and Abraham gets it out.
Yeah.
But it's ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Ability to buy.
Yeah. I'm willing to let you have it. I'm willing to give it to you.
Yep.
But no, as we said before, Abraham wants to make sure he owns it.
Yeah. And living in a pagan culture, Abraham understands how to do business, and in doing that, he has to respect their practices. Not give in, but respect their practices. All right? Not compromise his values, but respect it. All right? And so, when possible, he's going to be a Jew to the Jews, and he's going to be a Hittite to the Hittites. Okay? Now, why do you think he bows before Ephron? Why does he bow?
Because you're safe.
All right, out of respect? Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. In the midst of that story, he bows. All right? To show the respect, I believe. And so Abraham agrees, and he's going to buy the cave, the land, lock, stock, and barrel. All right? Now, the last few verses, I believe, of chapter 23 read like a deed of purchase with the exact location. Did you catch that? Let it be where make the covenants on the Euphrates River. Give you the land of the people. I mean, it just tells you from this sea to that sea to this and that. I mean, you're going to lay out where the land. And so now, all of a sudden, what Abraham has done is he's agreed, or they have agreed, him and Ephron, because Abraham says no to giving it for free. And so Ephron says the market price is how much? 400 shekels of silver. Now, does Abraham barter for that? No, he gets out his trusty wallet and starts counting out the 400 shekels of silver, or his bag, whatever he carried. All right.
And that was important because
Yeah.
if he would have counter-offered, Ephraim could have said no.
Yes.
He could have said no at any point, and there wouldn't have been a deal. And he probably would have said no.
Yeah.
So he threw out this absurd number, 10 times the price, probably as much money as his entire land and material, and Abraham doesn't give him a chance on the negotiations. He says, I am going to, because I need that land.
Yeah.
And I also find it ironic as Ephraim starts the discussion, almost as like God started so many discussions with Abraham. I'm giving you this land. I'll give you this cave. But it's like, no. I'm only going to trust God on this. With you, we want a deal.
Yeah. That's right. Bob has something?
Well, Abraham loved Sarah and he always provided for her. And he was going to provide for her to the end. He wanted to provide a burial place. Not somebody give him something.
Yeah.
I think Abraham's such a negotiator here because it's like everyone said, he's gotten to a point where, the price was offered. He accepted it immediately so that the offer could not be rescinded. But then he's doing this in front of everyone, so there's no question, or no dissension, or no disagreement, or second story.
Yeah.
And it's total.
Yeah.
He's a smart man.
Yep. Let me get out my wallet. Let me get out my checkbook. Let me write that right now. Go ahead, Mike.
If you go to Israel, this is to your last point, Matt, you go there, traditionally this is where Abraham built this. Or, this is our speculation of where Isaac was sacrificed. Everything is traditional, or this is what our best guess is. Only one thing is exact in all of existence of Abraham. That cave still exists today. He's buried in it with his wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
This is the only lasting thing we have about Abraham.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, for 400 pieces of shekels of silver, he buys the land with the cave. Now he owns it. It's his. So he doesn't have to worry about, I'm trespassing to get to over there. This is mine. All right. He's planning ahead as well, as we'll see here in a couple minutes. All right. It must have been strange for Abraham to petition the Hittites for the land in light of the promise of God that Mike covered a few weeks ago. And on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants, I have given this land from the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, to the land of Kenite, Kizanites, the Catamite, the Hittite, the Perizzites, Ephron, the Amorite, the Canaanite, and Gerites, Jebusites, and all the ites. He had already said this to them. The land is yours. The land's going to be yours. It's going to be yours and your descendants. But what's changed for Abraham? Sarah died. He's got a choice. Why doesn't he go back home and bury her? Why doesn't he go back to her?
That's a good point.
I
That's not
think-
where he's supposed to be.
I think it's because he loved her so much and that she had lived in a tent and went everywhere that he told her, even when he shouldn't have done it, and lied for him and gave up all that he was going to give at least one thing to her, and that is having a final resting place. She knows we could own something together, and we wouldn't have to be a foreigner any longer.
I think too, it kind of symbolizes that life is no longer his life. The life of the Chaldeans and whatever that he came from, that God brought him out of, that's no longer him. That's no longer his family. There's nothing there. He wants to bury her in the place of the promise. And so he makes it a point to do
He's
that.
believing God.
Yeah.
Because God has called him. Remember years and years when he was a young man in his 70s? Leave this land and go to the place I'm going to show you. And he goes home, and can you imagine that conversation? Sarah, get ready, we're going to move. Oh, where? I have no idea. Wherever God tells us to stop, we're there. When should we go? Now. Well, I haven't got any boxes from U-Haul. I haven't gone to the post office to change our address. Well, we got to go. Well, it's not my time. No, they leave. They go. They follow God. They walk by faith. And I agree. I think he's saying, I'm putting that away. That's my old life.
And this would have been the closest cave, closest resting spot, place God originally takes both of them.
Yeah. That's right. Now, death could be a testimony. All right? We got to ask why so much space is taken up by a story of transaction. Why do you think so much space is taken up? I mean, a whole chapter. Why do you think that is?
You know, I was thinking about this. Yesterday we were cleaning monuments, gravestones. And really, you know, when you live your life and you go through life and everything, you have possessions, you have a house, you have family and stuff. When it comes down to it, in the end, all you have is a rock with your name on it. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe you got a rock with your name on it. I was thinking, how long does that rock with the name on it last? I mean, how many tombstones do we know that go back to the 1700s or beyond? In the United States, not so much, maybe in Europe. But eventually, the words even come off.
Right.
Because it erodes, the wind and the snow and the seasons, the words come off. And then the rocks fell over in the cemetery. You see that in the old tombstones. And here he's got a cave. His name's not on it, but that's really all he got.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as a marker on this earth.
I know.
You know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this This cave is going to be kind of an anchor point for the Israelites. Later on, in Genesis 50, they bring Jacob back and bury him in the same cave after he dies. And they keep doing that, right?
That's right.
And I think Joseph will end up there as well. And that's even when they're away from the land, the promised land, that's an anchor point for the people of Israel. So for Moses, this was extremely important. The Spirit, that he was inspired to write about this because that's important to them.
Bill?
I think it's interesting that she lived 127 years and they had no hope. And God provides. Everything came together and it worked out just fine.
Yeah. But that's going to be 400 years until Moses writes this down. But through the inspiration of the Spirit, he knows what's been going on. And so Sarah dies in faith from obeying her husband and obeying God. They've left everything. They've never possessed the promised land. She, like Abraham, is an alien and a stranger in this land. And in burying Sarah in a cave and not in their former land, I believe Abraham is making a statement of faith. He believes one day, as God has promised them, this land is going to be to their descendants. And as Mike and Brian have already said, at the end of Genesis, the cave is full. You got Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Leah, and then finally, when we get closer to the book of Joshua, and they get into the promised land, they're going to remember the words of an old man named Joseph. When he would say in chapter 50 of Genesis, "When I die, bury my bones in the cave, in the land. Bury my bones." And somebody, or a group of somebodies, for years, has the job of carrying the bones of Joseph. And so when they get to the promised land, they go to the cave and they put Joseph in the cave. It's a full cave by now. Full of people who walked by faith. People like us that follow God and some days don't follow God. And some days we're on the top of the mountain, some days we're in the valley. Now, it's interesting, according to the Archaeological Study Bible, this cave is a special place for the Jews, Christians, and Muslims as well. And as Micah said, it's still there. People have built over it. Herod the Great built a monumental enclosure over the site. Others have built churches and mosques and marketplaces and other things to mark that place, but the cave's still there. It's been regarded as a special place by whoever ruled the land. But it still remains. Yeah, Mike?
Machpelah is called, it's the word for doubles. It's the cave of doubles, is what they'll refer to it as, because it's Abraham and Sarah and Rebecca and Isaac. And traditionally, the thought also is Adam and Eve is buried there. Somehow God did that. But it's interesting. It's just looking at that cave, all the things that were done at it, who's laid there, and also who came together to bury it, because it would be the last time that Isaac and Ishmael would ever meet again and bury buried their father. Jacob and Esau would meet again and buried their father there. You know, they've had plays written about just the events that happened at their age. And you're right, there's a lot of history all about it.
Okay, yeah. But if it would have just been 3 or 4 verses, we'd probably read right past it and go on with life. But here, a whole chapter to set up.
So especially
things to
God,
come.
God even honored the request. That's where the relationship of Abraham built. God didn't tell Abraham to do this. Abraham did it, but he did it within the relationship with God, and God honored the request. I believe.
So what did we learn about God today? What did we learn about God? All right, he is trustworthy.
He provides.
He provides.
I think he intends us to be very good people too.
Okay.
Come back together, bring those bones back here.
Okay.
I mean, there must be some emphasis on it. I mean, look at this, these verses. I mean,
I ain't going to carry that old man's bones from here to there. That's crazy. But they do.
yeah.
They honor the promise. Anything else about God we learned?
I remember it struck me at the beginning when he first approaches the Hittites, and at least in this English Standard Version it says, "Hear us, my Lord, you are a prince of God among us." And so the presence of God has been made aware to these people by Abraham's presence. So they have witnessed God working in Abraham's life throughout the time that he has lived among them. And so that's powerful because, you know, they recognize, okay, you know, there is a God and he's with you, and we've seen the results of that.
That's right. Good point. You just stole 2 pages of my notes, but
Oh.
no, because I was going to ask after, you know, what did we learn about Abraham? But that's just something I thought that we went through real fast. That we go back and see that, you know, they see God through him, you know, because he's faithful. You know, even when things didn't make sense, he's faithful.
They also, they acknowledge God though too here. I mean, they may not follow him, but they acknowledge him here.
Yeah.
But they feared. Throughout the whole
Yeah.
story of Abraham's life, it's amazing because Pharaoh feared God. Abimelech feared God. These people were fearing God. It took all the way to Abraham's life, and he was ready to sacrifice Isaac, where God says, "I finally see that you fear me."
Yeah.
Because the relationship had been on blessings. What good thing's going to happen if I follow you eventually? And here it's, you know, the great thing about the chapter right before this is Abraham is constantly saying, when God calls, he goes, "Here I am. I'm ready. I'm listening. Tell me what you want me to do." And that's where he grew in his faith.
All right, so we're off to a good start on the second section. As I said earlier, Mike did a great job, 1 through 22. So next week we will be in chapter 24 and 25. So read ahead if you want to. We'll dig deep into that information. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for our time together in your word. Father, thank you for people like Abraham and Sarah that lived and walked by faith. Help us to do the same. And help us to continue to be good students of yours as we share that message with others. In Christ we pray. Amen. Thank you. Check your mailboxes if you haven't.
How's that?